Today's passage is 2 Samuel chapter 9 verses 1 through 13. Let's read together. David asked, "Is there anyone still left of the house of Saul to whom I can show kindness for Jonathan's sake?" Now there was a servant of Saul's household named Ziba. They summoned him to appear before David, and the king said to him, "Are you Ziba?" "At your service," he replied. The king asked, "Is there no one still alive from the house of Saul to whom I can show God's kindness?" Ziba answered the king, "There is still a son of Jonathan. He is lame in both feet." "Where is he?" the king asked. Ziba answered, "He is at the house of Machir, son of Ammiel in Lodabar." So King David had him brought from Lodabar, from the house of Machir, son of Ammiel. When Mephibosheth, son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, came to David, he bowed down to pay him honor. David said, "Mephibosheth." "At your service," he replied. "Don't be afraid," David said to him, "for I will surely show you kindness. For the sake of your father Jonathan, I will restore to you all the land that belonged to your grandfather Saul, and you will always eat at my table." Mephibosheth bowed down and said, "What is your servant that you should notice a dead dog like me?" Then the king summoned Ziba, Saul's steward, and said to him, "I have given your master's grandson everything that belonged to Saul and his family. You and your sons and your servants are to farm the land for him and bring in the crops, so that your master's grandson may be provided for, and Mephibosheth, grandson of your master, will always eat at my table." Now Ziba had 15 sons and 20 servants. Then Ziba said to the king, "Your servant will do whatever my lord the king commands his servant to do." So Mephibosheth ate at David's table like one of the king's sons. Mephibosheth had a young son named Micah, and all the members of Ziba's household were servants of Mephibosheth, and Mephibosheth lived in Jerusalem because he always ate at the king's table. He was lame in both feet. Amen. I will share the word under the title, David and Mephibosheth. There is a Korean saying, "A frog forgets the days when it was a tadpole." It points to the tendency of people to change after they gain power. Before receiving power, a person may seem very humble, but after gaining power, that same person can change so completely that we wonder whether this is the same person. We see this around us from time to time. Lincoln also left these words, "Nearly all men can stand adversity, but if you want to test a man's character, give him power." In other words, if you want to test a person's character, do not give him hardship, but give him power. That is a very meaningful statement. A person's true self is revealed more before power than before hardship. Before today's passage, one person stands before this test. That person is David. David's kingdom is growing strong at a very rapid pace. As we meditated on yesterday's passage, God gave David victory wherever he went. Now the nations around David had to choose. They either had to bow their heads to David and bring tribute, or they had to fight David, become defeated nations, and serve David. That is how powerful David's kingdom had become. Internally as well, David's kingdom was becoming firmly organized. David appointed various officials to oversee the affairs of the nation. God gave David's kingdom firm stability, not only externally, but also internally. At this moment, David's true character would be revealed. It was because David now had power. In the time of suffering, he lived humbly, holding on to God. But now that he had power, what would David be like? Thankfully, David was keeping his first heart well. The evidence appears in verse 1. Let us read verse 1 together. David asked, "Is there anyone still left of the house of Saul to whom I can show kindness for Jonathan's sake?" Amen. At the very moment when he had power, David was remembering the difficult days, and he remembered the promise he had made during those difficult days. That promise was the covenant he made with Jonathan, the son of Saul. In 1 Samuel 20:15, it records that David and Jonathan made a covenant with each other, and Jonathan said these words to David. I will read it for you. This is 1 Samuel 20:15. "Do not ever cut off your kindness from my house, not even when the Lord has cut off every one of David's enemies from the face of the earth." Amen. Jonathan was already saying that David, not Jonathan himself, would become king, and when that time came, he asked David not to cut off kindness from Jonathan's own house. It meant, "Please protect my descendants, please preserve them." David remembered that covenant with Jonathan now, when he had become king and possessed strong power. And he kept that promise. Remembering that covenant, he had people search to see whether there were any survivors among Saul's descendants. He wanted to find them and care for them. Outwardly, this may look obvious, but in fact, it was not. The family David was trying to keep alive was the house of the former king. When a royal house changed, there was no such thing in the ancient world as treating the descendants of the former king with favor. Completely wiping them out was the most basic rule. This is the rule of worldly people. We know very well the Wang family, the royal house of Goryeo. After Joseon was founded, the Wang family was almost wiped out. In order to escape and live in hiding, it is widely known that some changed their surname by adding one stroke to the Chinese character for Wang, becoming John or OK. The story of the extremely popular film The King and the Clown belongs to a similar context. I still have not had time to watch it, but the tragic story of King Danjong is also a story in which the person who purged him was not even from a changed royal house, but his own uncle, a relative. But now David is not trying to find and eliminate the descendants of the former king, he is trying to care for them. David found Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan, and had him brought to the palace, and he said this. This is verse 7, let us read it together. David said to him, "Don't be afraid, for I will surely show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan. I will restore to you all the land that belonged to your grandfather Saul, and you will always eat at my table." Amen. David said, "For your father Jonathan, I will show kindness to you," and he returned all of Saul's fields to him. He also allowed Mephibosheth to eat with him at the king's table. The reason he allowed him to eat at his table probably carried two opposite meanings. One was a pure desire to show grace. The other may also have included the intention of keeping Saul's family close, so that any possibility of rebellion would be removed in advance. In any case, David treated Mephibosheth favorably. He spared the bloodline of the former king, and even returned his land. This was a truly exceptional and extraordinary act. Beloved, how could David make such a decision? This is very important as we meditate on today's passage. I think the answer may be found in one word that appears repeatedly in the text. Before looking at today's passage, in the passage I just read where David and Jonathan made a promise, 1 Samuel 20:14 and 15, there is a word translated as kindness. And in today's passage, in verses 1, 3, and 7, the same word is translated as kindness or favor. In Hebrew, it is the same word. What is that word? It is the word many of you know well, hesed. In 1 Samuel 20, hesed is used for the Lord's kindness and David's kindness. And in today's passage, verses 1, 3, and 7, the kindness of God that David will show to Mephibosheth is expressed with this very word, hesed. Beloved, what was David living according to? He was not living according to the human tradition of killing the people of the former royal house. David was living according to God's covenant-keeping kindness, God's hesed. This is extremely important. The word hesed carries the concrete meaning of grace grounded in covenant. Wherever it is used, the covenant has been broken, yet the covenant itself is not destroyed. The covenant between God and us has been broken on our side, but God holds on to that broken covenant and does not shatter it. So the covenant is kept. And how is it kept? It is not kept because the other party kept the covenant well. It is kept because God is faithful, because God is merciful, and because God is gracious. God does not break the covenant but continues to keep it. This is God's He said covenant. We could not keep the covenant faithfully, we broke it. But God does not break that covenant. From God's side, He holds on to it and continues to keep it. This is hesed. What matters is that David practiced this. Before he became king, David spoke of hesed. After he became king, David practiced hesed. Even after becoming a frog, he remembered the days when he was a tadpole. Even after receiving power, he lived without losing his humanity. David did not live according to the rules or traditions of the world. Even after becoming king, he lived only according to God's rule, according to God's grace. Beloved, what are we living according to? Are we not living according to the rules of this world and the way people live? Are we living according to the rule of God's kingdom, according to the way God treats us? God has treated us with the grace of hesed. We failed to keep God's covenant, but God has faithfully and one-sidedly continued to keep the covenant He made. By that grace we have come this far, and even now we live by that grace. In the name of the Lord, I bless all of you to live this day also by that grace. Just as God, who is faithful to His covenant, treated us who had no qualification with grace and mercy, What if we also kept this rule of God's kingdom and treated our families, our neighbors, and the co-workers we meet in our workplaces with this hesed, serving them quietly? No matter how difficult a person may be, can that person be like Saul was to David? Can that person be like Saul, who tried to kill David? Even if others repay us as enemies, may we live this day by kindly showing and sharing with someone else the hesed we have received, the complete love we receive from God, and the grace of hesed. I bless you in the name of the Lord.